Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Louder Now podcast. I'm your host, Jared Deal. Faith, mental health, recovery, addiction. These are the topics and subjects we tackle on this podcast. Really glad that you're here. And here is another episode of the podcast.
I'm excited to have her here. She works for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So I'm sure some of you guys know about that, or maybe you don't. But yeah, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jared. Yeah, it's about time we were able to put this together. I appreciate the invitation.
Of course.
You were an awesome guest too.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what got you into, as a job now, like helping people with suicide prevention? Because that's awesome. But how did that start?
Well, thanks for asking, and it's kind of fun to be able to talk about it a little bit because normally, so in my role as co-chair for the Orange County chapter at American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, or AFSP, when we have meetings with our volunteers and such, I kind of have a little canned elevator pitch where I kind of share my story, but my story is complicated, like many people who have a connection to suicide or to mental health issues. So I can never share everything. I'd be explaining for, not that we have an hour either, but it's kind of complicated. So I guess the main catalyst that caused me to walk in to look up online about the cause and suicide prevention and actually walk into a meeting 4 years ago the story started like this. So our youngest son, he suffered a physical injury and we were not aware of that, but he was having constant 24/7 headaches and pain. And so we pulled him from school and homeschooled him. He was in school online. This was during high school. And he happened to be a Boy Scout, and the family was into Boy Scouts. My husband here locally was one of the first Scoutmasters in our troop, and our older son, Yanni's older brother, went through, and Yanni was doing it again. And he was, for those who are not familiar with Boy Scouts, there's certain levels that you achieve, and he was the kind of ultimate award is Eagle Scout. And so Yanni had made it through Life Scout, and so he was trying to finish Eagle. And Yanni always, I always admire his personality because he was never, when he did have to go out, and obviously he had to go out to doctors, and I was dragging him around everywhere to try to figure out what the heck was causing, his issues. He had a neurologist anyway. So, we were out and about, and he was still kind of trying to, complete school and go through the Boy Scouts. So occasionally he show up at meetings when he had a better day. And he was just always so positive. And I think one of the interesting things to see was when you have an illness like that others can't see, they don't understand, and they don't think you're sick. And those people who have mental illness, it's exactly the same thing, really, isn't it? So anyway, he was always positive, and he'd joke, but nobody really understood how much he was suffering, how much he was hurting. And that's not really part of my main story, but it just explains kind of a little bit about what he was going through and trying to complete this Eagle Scout Award and finish his Eagle project and do everything that he needed to do to wrap up. And there's a lot of reports that, when you're done with the Eagle project, you have to fill out stuff, and you have to go through a board of review and things. So our family was really close. It was not a very big Boy Scout troop, and we were really close to most of the families in the troop. And one of the other families and one of Yanni's friends, he was about a year younger than Yanni, he had finished his Eagle Scout project. And kind of just after Yanni he did finish, and after he got his name is Ethan, and I know his parents like the fact that we talk about and share how much he's, what an amazing young man this young guy and friend of Yanni's was. He took his life, and it was really tragic. I don't want to talk about the circumstances so much because that might be triggering for someone, but it was a death by firearm. Okay. His mom was a nurse and was in the home at the time, making him lunch downstairs. His parents had seen no warning signs. And when I went to their house that next morning and sat with them with a few other friends, man, I hadn't a clue how to support them, what to say, what they needed, what they didn't need. I just felt so helpless in supporting them. And of course, in the moment, they were going through so much. They, unfortunately, I mean, they were able to obviously get through, but for me and my own personal experience and stepping outside of it, right. That's what made me realize a couple things. One of them was that because our son Yanni, one night at midnight, he was in constant pain. So sometimes he was up at all hours. Sometimes he slept during the day. It was pretty horrendous. And one night at midnight, he called me into his room, and I sat down in his bed and we were talking a little bit, and then he said, "Mom, I don't think I can go on." And he clearly had thought about taking his own life. And so we were able to have that conversation in the moment. And I wasn't trained back then. I didn't know, how to talk to him even, or, I wasn't doing anything that I'm doing now, where I feel a little bit better equipped to have a conversation with people about that. Yeah. I was just mom. Right. And so in looking back, I realized that if Yanni had chosen not to share that with me in the moment, and we hadn't been able to have a conversation, I very easily could have been, sitting in Ethan's parents' shoes and experienced what they were experiencing. And it was so close to home. Mm-hmm. With the two boys, knowing each other. I just knew that I had to find out more about warning signs and find out how I could support people who had suffered a loss. And also, I'd seen Ethan the week before. And of course, everybody who experiences a loss like this, I don't think anyone is any different. Everybody always looks back. Yeah. Questions. Was there something that I could have said? Was there something I could have done differently? Maybe I missed something. So we question ourselves, in the moment. And so that was part of it too. So it took me a year after that before I actually walked into the meeting, but had just been building inside me, and I knew. And then the other side of my story is that also I have a family member who I'm very close to, who is still not comfortable sharing their story and experience. So, so I'm not going to tell you too many details about them, but
Sure.
yeah, we're super close. And this person has lived experience, attempted several times, has lived with clinical depression for years and years. And so supporting that person also was really important to me. And I guess until what happened with Ethan and with Yanni, you know, I didn't make the connection that, you know, oh my gosh, this is for sure really what I'm supposed to do, because this will help my family member as well and help me support that person.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of an interesting little side note too. My family, so much stigma. We grew up, you did not talk about mental illness. You did not, you know, I grew up, you tell people what you think they want to hear.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until after I started doing the work that I do with AFSP that my mom actually shared with me that my aunt died by suicide.
Okay.
Only she and my father and her sister knew that my aunt's death was by suicide. They hadn't shared it with anyone else in the family or anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which was kind of interesting, but I guess because, you know, the more I guess talked to my mom about what I do and about the stigma in our family and about how I felt that stigma affected my loved one who has the lived experience and caused sometimes lack of support. Was, I guess, until I started talking about all that with my mom too, maybe that she realized, you know, oh, well, maybe I can share this.
Yeah.
And then part of that story also was that my aunt's husband had died by suicide as well, although it was many years prior. So,
wow.
So that's my full story.
Wow. We'll have some thoughts. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Yeah, I know it's a lot. Sorry, but
no, it's okay. No worries to be sorry. And yeah, you know what? I appreciate you saying to people listening. I'll put it in the notes and timestamp it or something. Like, we are talking about suicide, and I know that can be triggering for some people. Everybody's experience is different. We were just talking before we started recording that, like, you know, when I talk about it, it's way in the past, kind of. Part of the story is. But how old was the Ethan when he
17?
Okay. Yeah, that's wow. But you were talking about, like, well, you said the warning sign thing with the suicide prevention.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most people probably aren't trained at what to do, and even you know, police officers and other people. I mean, that's another kind of conversation too, that, like, trained professional, you know, police who have a lot of education and training don't always know the signs either. Teachers, people in education, I mean, right, there's all these different layers of yeah, our natural tendency is to hide things from people. And like you were saying about your son,
100%.
yeah, hide. We just pretend like it's really an instinct. It's not even well, maybe we think it through, but we don't really spend too much time thinking, like, well, this is how I'm gonna hide it from people. I think we just go there because you know, like you were saying, there's stigma, but there's fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. I'm a person of faith, so if you're a faith person, maybe that gets in the way. You know, you're trying to be a good follower of whatever you're following. And then you're like, But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, so anyway, it's just interesting you say that, because that's like, why do people do that? Or like,
Yeah, I
what
think
do you
that's
do?
kind of one of the reasons that I was drawn to AFSP as an organization, a cause, because, you know, obviously I mean, there's a lot of organizations that, you know, are supportive for mental health, or, you know, or for suicide prevention. AFSP is not the only one. It is the largest in the country, though focused on research and suicide prevention education and awareness. So I think that's sort of what got me, because
Right.
if we can, first of all, just create a community where we can talk safely about mental health and suicide, we know research has proven that that saves lives.
Right.
And if we can go in and we can educate people as to the warning signs, and make people comfortable about having that awkward or brave conversation, you know, it's okay to just, you know, turn to somebody and say, you know, hey, you know, I noticed you're a little bit off, you know, you doing okay.
Yeah.
And people just are not comfortable doing that. And we hear time and time again about people who, after the fact, you know, maybe several people noticed that, you know, maybe there was something a little bit off or something wrong, and nobody was comfortable bringing it up or talking to the person. And all it takes is one person
Yeah.
to actually have that conversation or ask, right?
Yeah, I think it's not so much about the suicide language being a part of the conversation. Like, hey, are you having suicidal thoughts? Or, hey, I'm noticing that you've been isolating. Um, you know, I noticed that you drew a picture of, you're talking about death, or, you know, because I've been through the trainings too, and I definitely am not an expert. I know my own experience, you know.
Yeah,
It's more, the reason why it's part of a challenge, in my opinion, is like, because in general, people are not really being vulnerable and honest, just kind of with their whole life, like, in general. So you're not really having meaningful talks, just, you know, every day. So if someone just
yeah,
gets to
exactly.
the right, if someone just gets to the heart, because we've all experienced this, or I hope we've experienced this, I should say, where someone just, you know, looks you in the eye, right, and just is like, "Hey, what's really going on?" You know, because we go, how are you? And then, you know, it's only three answers, right?
All
Good,
right.
all right, you know, fine, or okay, maybe four. But the fourth one would be, I'm sad, or I'm having a bad day, right? And then usually, if it's, uh, you know, if you give that answer, then it's like, oh, let me find out what's going on with this person, right? Like, why
Right,
is he
right.
sad? But I think that's some of the breakdown, is that there's a lot of loneliness and isolation. Um, so maybe we just don't feel like we have conversations that are meaningful at all. And then now this other layer is like, oh, well, let's talk about suicide. And you're right. I mean, it could just take one person that gets to the heart of it, and that pulls that person really out of, um, you know, doesn't make all their problems go away instantly, but pulls them closer to getting help.
Exactly. It could be the beginning of getting someone help. And you're right, it kind of seems like extremes, because we're, you know, we're all living in this, you know, world, especially with, you know, social media and our online presence, and, you know, putting out there only the good stuff. And, you know, now that's changing, and we talk about being our authentic selves and having authentic conversations, and, you know, sharing what we really feel. But I don't know. I think the reality is we still all are trying to, you know, I know for me personally, I still care way too much about what other people think about me and my life. And I want to
Yeah,
put, you know, the good stuff
me
out there.
too. Yeah, me too. That's huge. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is kind of like a uh here's the question. Like, you guys have the 988 thing now. the work that you do. I was going to say, what is kind of the because I always put the end of my episodes the phone number to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline.
Yeah, so the national hotline. So yeah, so let's chat about 988. Okay, so
Yeah,
now
yeah.
instead of the 800 number,
Okay.
we now have 988, which is so much easier to remember. No one ever remembered what the 800 number was. The text to talk was 741-741, and most people, unless you're doing the work that we do, never remember that either. So
right. I've heard of that too. Right. 741. What was
so you could
that
text,
supposed to be?
you could text the word help or talk to 741-741, and then you could text with someone from the Lifeline. So it was the text version of calling the 800 Lifeline number.
Okay. Okay.
So with 988, I think there's some, oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think there's some confusion about it. So now I'm not with AFSP, we're not affiliated with 988. We don't have operators. We don't man that hotline. We provide it as a resource, though, to, to our communities nationally, so that people can call and get help. So what has happened is 988, as of this past weekend, July 16th, is now the new number. So it's the same hotline.
Okay.
It's just an easier number to remember.
Right.
But there's more to it than that. So it's the beginning of creating better and a little more separate mental health support help for people in crises.
Okay. Right.
So that a lot of people were still calling 911 because they didn't know about the suicide prevention hotline number.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what the 988 bill that was passed and what has been happening behind the scenes is that, first of all, nationwide, a whole bunch of money needed to be raised and still needs to be raised to put in the infrastructure, because if you lived in a remote area in some of the states, they didn't physically have all the telephone equipment. I don't know, all the details about how it even all works, but you need equipment and you need certain things to happen in order to change a number and have calls go to where you want them to go when you call your phone number. So that was one part of it. And then of course, the other part of it is that and I don't think this has changed, by 2027, when you call, you actually get a counselor on the phone. It's not a trained operator.
Oh, okay.
So I think the misconception is that, ooh, 988, brand new number, we instantly, everyth's changed and, it's going to be a perfect system, but it's the beginning of what will be more and better support.
Right.
But we still need to be a little bit patient. And this was fresh in my mind today because the family member who, I love, who struggles, sent an email to the family, and the email was a link to a news article. And the gist of the news article was basically, 988 is, active, but it's got flaws, and it implied that it could increase the amount of law enforcement response to mental health calls.
Okay.
And just by saying that, I think it's super deceiving, and it kind of irks me.
Okay.
Because the whole goal and the whole point of the 988 was that depending on where you live in each area, you will get trained mental health or behavioral health support, and that's what the response will be.
Mm-hmm.
But so 2 points, I guess I just want to make. The first one is, of course, because we know that there's a higher number of firearms involved suicides, if a call goes in to 988 or, you know, what was the old hotline number, if there's concern over someone's immediate safety, then law enforcement's likely going to be dispatched,
Mm-hmm.
you know, no matter what,
Right.
you know, the circumstances are. But like what's happening here in Orange County, I can speak to Orange County because I know Orange County well, because that's where I live and where I work.
Right.
Here in Orange County, now there is a separate division of the Orange County Sheriff's Department that is new. It's the Behavioral Health Division. And all of the law enforcement in the Behavioral Health Division all have to have additional specialized mental health training.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do continuing education in the mental health training. And I know that because we're, you know, putting together, having, you know, presenting our Talk Saves Lives program to them as part of their continuing education. And so when you say law enforcement is going to be dispatched, I know it's very upsetting to a lot of people who have had bad experiences in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that that's not going to still happen depending on where you live.
Mm-hmm.
Or that, you know, the 988 and what's happening is going to fix it all. But it is steps in the right direction. And a lot of areas are trying to go, you know, to this same format where, you know, so I think it's deceiving to say, you know, oh, well, yeah, the police are going to show up and, you know, assume that they're not going to have the proper training, because now they're required to have the proper training.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's the difference. And then you know, the other kind of point I just wanted to make is that, you know, let's all be a little, you know, patient. Again, it's the beginning of the change.
Right.
And, you know, it's not going to be instant.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Yeah. I mean,
Sorry if I went so long.
No, it's fine. No, it's good stuff. You know, I mean, I've never had anybody on podcast that works for a suicide kind of organization like you do. As I've shared before, this is not my only struggle, but just having suicidal thoughts and going through, you know, the suffering that I have, where, you know, it's like, okay, if you're really struggling and you're trying to reach out and you're in a state of mind where things are really chaotic and hopeless, right? That's where it's dangerous, because it's a lot of times it is impulsive, right? It's like,
Yes,
you might feel real intense suicidal thoughts for 30 minutes, but you know, it doesn't have to stay that way. I think it can get redirected, and you know, we're made to like connect with other people and talk and not go through things alone. Kind of back to the thing you said at the beginning with the just Ethan, you know, holding, like, he didn't show any signs, and then all of a sudden, you know, he takes his life, which is, you know, very sad, you know. So but yeah, I would think 988 would be easier in the moment of struggling than to Google, you know, 1-800 national, you know, like,
exactly.
not to make light of it, but just like if you're really struggling, I could see, like you said, people just do 911 because it's like 3 numbers. So it's like 988, like, let's get it. That would be much easier. But, and you know this, that the mystery with all this stuff is that and the hard part is the part of us that makes choices, right? We have to choose, and it's really hard to make good choices when you're suffering and you're struggling. And then we know that suicide is not rational. It doesn't really make sense. It just makes sense to you in the moment because you're hurting so much. So it's like people do have to choose to like get the help that's you can't choose for them, but we can try to make it as easy as possible to save your life. Really, it's like no one who
And that's what it's about.
Yeah, anyone who
Yeah,
survives. I was gonna say anyone who survives suicide, they go, "Oh, I can't believe I want," or not. Like they're usually not regretting staying alive. They might feel like, "Oh, I failed at that," and I feel like a total. But I mean, once they start working through it, they get around people, and could be medication that they need to, or just all the things that go into recovery. You're gonna look back and go, "Wow, I'm really glad I didn't go through with that. That was me choosing out of pain."
Exactly. Many times it's just, in our training, we learn that it's in the moment that individual is experiencing so much pain that all they can think of is eliminating that pain.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to distance that individual from either the means or get them help or, get them through that moment,
Right.
Could potentially be life-saving. And, as you said, that is the challenge. People, if someone is by themselves, they would have to make that choice to reach out on their own. And that may or may not happen, but with a 988 number, maybe they would remember it. And, or 98 or text 988, or, now there's even, I think it's 988lifeline.org. You can chat online if you're, into computer chatting.
Oh,
so
okay, nice.
That's another even new third option, which potentially someone might, do if they don't want to talk to somebody in person. Sometimes it's easier to do through the screen, which is why texting was popular. Well, now you can chat.
Right.
Or what other people don't think about too is if you are concerned about someone and you're with someone who you think might, be in crisis, ask them if you can call together or chat together or, talk together. Sometimes that is just enough, to make the person feel more comfortable and do it.
Yeah.
I don't think sometimes we think about the fact that, oh yeah, well, I could do it for them. You can, if that person's not comfortable, but you can call and say, hey, I'm with someone right now. What do I do?
Right.
How do I get them help? They're not comfortable talking to you, but they're right here with me.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you sharing, and I just want to also honor the work that you're doing and helping people. I mean, my way of helping people is doing this podcast and wanting to write about things. The speaking I've done with NAMI, and I know I'm not never say never, right? Maybe someday I'll be a person on the phone that's talking to people, right? I'm not.
Yeah.
I have thought about doing that. I just, whatever, I'm on the path that I'm on right now. But it really is amazing what you do and just the perspective that you have. I mean, you're like, the boots on the ground or whatever the saying is, right? You're like right there on the front lines. So I'll ask you one last question. You'll especially appreciate this question, but I try to do this to everyone. Like, what advice do you give to? Because I know when I was in my episode a couple years ago, I was listening to podcasts and books and memoirs of people's journeys, and I was like feeling suicidal. So I was like wanting to just get advice from whatever I could find besides the people in my life that were there for me. So I was trying to find it in like books and podcasts. So like if someone's struggling and they're feeling really hopeless, like what would you say to that person if they were just, right in front of you or on the phone or something?
Well, it's happened. I mean, I've had people at outreach tables who, I've stepped aside with, and we've had that discussion. And it's really hard because I don't have a connection with that individual. So if it's someone that I don't know, and I don't know their history, but they've let me know that, they are having an issue in the moment, the conversation usually goes, something along the lines of, first of all, in the moment, asking if they have a support person or if they have a plan, or if they have, a doctor or a therapist that they're in treatment with already. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but getting that little bit of information can be helpful. Okay. And then, just sometimes it's a matter of staying with them. I mean, one time I was at an event, and it was actually a motorcycle show, and we had an outreach table there. And there were a lot of veterans there, and, was open to the public and a lot of people around. And we had a man come up to the table, and I don't know, I like to think that maybe I'm a little bit intuitive and empathetic, and I can sense a little bit if someone wants to chat. So I usually step a little to the side. And when I do that, usually, people will either feel comfortable approaching me or not. And this man did, and we started to chat for a minute. And he was sharing with me that he was having suicidal ideation, and he was not okay, but he was so upset and emotional by sharing that he had to walk away. And of course, the last thing I'm going to do with my, AFSP Be the Voice suicide prevention t-shirt on is going to, follow him around.
Right.
Because that's not comfortable for him, and, respecting him and his space and everything. So I sort of kept an eye on him from my table, and then I saw him go kind of behind he went to an area of the parking lot that was a little bit screened. And so I said, okay, this is probably my opportunity. So I walked away and kind of went over to where he had been, and he was actually in his car with the car door open. And I asked him if I could approach him, and he said yes. And so I said, I just, wanted to hand you my card. Here's my phone number. Like, are you okay right now? Okay. And he said, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think I'm okay right now. And then I asked him what I normally would ask people was, do you have someone that you can call or talk to? Right. And he said, I do. And I said, okay, well, when you go home, will you promise me you'll either call them, or if you can't get a hold of them, call me? And he said, yeah, I will. And I said, okay. And I said, I don't want to leave here until I really know you're okay and that you're going to do that, because, I care about you. Yeah. And he actually let me take his hand, and he said, thank you. And I will. So I think sometimes it's just making that connection. And I guess as far as advice to someone, for help, I just say, to me, I'm all about the prevention aspect and trying not to get to that point.
Right.
So we're all about self-care for resilience. So my suggestion, just as a quick one to your audience, is if you haven't already, write down 1 or 2 things that you love to do. It's going to be different for everybody. That's something you can do in the moment. You don't have to go somewhere to do it. You don't have to spend money to do it. write them down, put them in your phone, put it on a sticky note and stick it on your mirror, put it somewhere where you can see it. And that way, in the moment, if you're struggling and you can't really focus and you're not really sure what the next step should be, go to your list and do one of those things, and maybe it will help you feel better.
Awesome. Yeah, I really like that. Well, again, thank you so much for being here today and talking. I know I had such a good time doing your podcast, and
Oh, thanks, Jared.
time just goes by fast. So here we are, like I said, almost a year later. And then just quickly, where's the best way for people to get a hold of you? Because I'll put it all in the notes, but I know you're on Instagram and Facebook, and you have a website.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, anybody can email me anytime, shellpavlis.afsp@gmail.com, or I have Linktree. I have a Linktree, Shell Pavlis.
Oh, okay,
So,
yeah, I have
and
that.
Yeah. And yeah, that brings everyone to my Hope Out of the Darkness podcast, and all the links there to get a hold of me.
Cool.
So yeah, I'd love it when people reach out, and thank you. And Jared, as always, I'm really glad you're still here doing what you do, because spreading the stories and talking about it helps.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And we just one day at a time, right? And my advice to people is to just try to take care of yourself. Part of taking care of yourself is reaching out, and it's not about having 100 friends. That's not really well, that's a really high number. You can have a lot of friends, but just having kind of your core 2 or 3 people or whatever, that's just like, oh, we tell each other everything and we talk and we hang out. And that takes time to develop that and get that. That's what we're made for. And we all know that we get busy with, well, we live in Southern California. It feels like it's always busy.
Right.
But just if you can find that, right, just close, fellowship with people, that's all you need, really. That will get you through a lot of things. It's not the only thing, but it's just having friends. And yeah, I've been in hospitals where people don't have friendships. You just learn that, and so it's always really sad. And then you are grateful for what you have. So
that's very true. Yep, no one's alone. So
for sure,
if they can reach out to someone. I love that. Thanks, and thanks so much for letting me talk. I could talk for hours.
I know. Yeah, no,
sorry.
it's all good. I love it. We could do like a 2-hour episode, but I'm not Joe Rogan, like I said. So no, kidding. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go, and thank you again for being on the podcast, and we'll be in touch. So
thanks, Jared.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. What would help me the most is if you go to Apple Podcast and leave a rating and a review. I'll put the link to that's in the notes. Also, the end of show notes have some resources. There's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and there's some other resources that I'll have in the bottom section for end of show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to my special guest for being here today, and we'll see you next time.